Can you just stand up? Because this particular panel discussion will be very, very useful for the startup companies. Only few. Oh, good. Good number. Why are you hesitating standing up? Good. Thank you. The reason why I wanted to mention that is very important panel discussion, particularly for the startup company's point of view. I'll tell my own experience. When after leaving my government job, I took voluntary retirement and started a company called Portal Player. We raised VC money to the tune of $87 million. After September 11th, we were not able to get the further money. Though we had several design wins from Japan, Korea, and all these countries, but we were not able to get the real business. So at one point of time, we were about to close the entire company. We had 3 offices, one in San Jose, Seattle, and Hyderabad. We were planned to close down the company. In fact, the Hyderabad office we closed down and started a services company because there was no money and no customer. Fortunately, during that time, Apple wanted to get into consumer electronics. We got a call from Steve Jobs, and that started our new journey. And we got the first silicon chips order from Apple. That's how Apple iPod came into existence using our silicon chip. And why I'm telling you this story, just because one customer access Apple, we were able to take our company public in NASDAQ, and afterwards we sold this company to NVIDIA Graphics for $357 million. Without that, we would have been zero, right? See, a lot of companies, now I am a general partner in a startup fund called Succeed Innovation Fund. I see a lot of startup companies thinking that they got first funding, angel funding, afterwards if they get Series A funding, they think that they won the race and game is over. No, game is not over. By just raising either angel fund or Series A funding, your game is not over. A lot of journey, unless you get the customer, unless you break into that this thing, then only you will be able to really succeed. So for that, this panel discussion, we are going to discuss on the bridge, the crucial bridge between the corporates and the startups. If you don't get this bridge properly built by you, though you may have great product, great people working with you, all that money, whatever you raised through angel or VC money in the bank, that's not going to help you unless you get the customers. So that's where this today's panel discussion is going to deliberate on. So I would like to request my esteemed panel members to introduce themselves. Afterwards, we'll get into the Q&A. I request Jyoti.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chaudhary. I'm Jyoti Pahad Singh. I am the Vice President at Society General. I head the open innovation out there. Prior to that, I've been a business consultant for more than 15 years, working primarily with the startups and also some of the multinationals and trying to create that bridge that we would be discussing about. And I do have a social startup as well. So I have seen the entire gamut of being an entrepreneur, consultant, and also being in the corporate. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Ramesh Kaza. I work for one of the world's largest custody bank, Straight Street Bank and Trust, based out of Boston. I have dual roles to play. I'm the country head for India on technology, and I also head the strategy and transformation. Much like what Jyoti is talking about, and some correlation to what Mr. Chaudhary said, I started my career as a rocket scientist at ISRO. And then back 32 years, exactly 32 years back, the same month, we did not even know the word startup then. I had a startup. It was a software company in Bangalore. And but for what we really missed, the guidance, mentoring, and the directional support from either an individual investor or corporate, I could have not probably stopped the company. So I'm very eager to share what I have learned through my journey through this session. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Varun Sood from Invest India. And echoing what Mr. Chaudhary and my co-panelists mentioned, Invest India is the national investment promotion and facilitation arm of Government of India. So think of it as a startup of Government of India, which is acting as a bridge between industry and the government. And that's where, we can play a role to facilitate your requirements with the right stakeholders. As Mr. Chaudhary was mentioning, supply demand has to be matched. I mean, there has to be some kind of a demand which has to be generated, and that's where Invest India, with its foreign investor portfolio and the bridges we have set up with all international countries, can help facilitate that journey for the startups as well. And my colleagues Raghav and Arshia from the banking team is here as well, and we'll be more than happy to have interactions post the session as well.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chaudhary and the team here. Thanks for inviting us here. I am Prateek. I'm focused on developing and institutionalizing emerging technologies for Hitachi. So Hitachi, as many of you would think of, is a consumer durables company, right? The company sells AC, but we are not just that. We are about $80 billion company selling high-speed trains, construction equipment, payment solutions, and whatnot. Right, so our focus is to develop and learn from the startup ecosystem and find solutions for our broader industrial equipment. Right, so I think we're really here to learn from you guys, and at the same time, try to find ways to engage with the startups for the various solutions or products that we have worldwide. Right, so it's basically a bit of a learn session, and also see how to engage with the various startups in India and the Kerala Startup Mission. Thank you.
Thank you. As Prateek was mentioning, it's not only giving business to the startups. Actually, all these big multinational companies, or any company for that matter, today we are going through this disruptive world. Whatever is today relevant, tomorrow it is going to be different. Like the previous speaker was talking about metaverse and NFTs and all that. We don't know what's all going to happen. So a lot of people, they say, the big companies, like they're in the middle of the ocean, it's like a big ship. Whereas a startup company like speedboats, they will maneuver and they will go very fast and all that. So this always, big companies would like to have the speedboats also with them, because I have seen myself as a startup founder and portal player, when we got acquired by NVIDIA Graphics, I have seen, big companies also, there's a lot of bureaucracy like government. Though I worked in central government and state government, it is sometimes worse than the government. That is the kind of a bureaucracy many multinational companies have got. It's not their fault. Unless they have that kind of systems in place, they will not be able to run the global operations. So that being the case, how a small startup company get into these big companies? Ramesh Raja, particularly, I'm addressing you because your company, State Street, manages trillions of assets worldwide, and it's a very big company. You have operations all over the globe. If a small startup company from Kochi, they want to interact with you or trying to solve some of your problems which you are looking for new innovations and all that, what is that equation? How is that it can happen? Is it so easy or that difficult? Can you articulate on that?
Thank you. Great question. State Street is 238 years old company, and we don't lend money and we don't have any credit cards. We just manage assets for a client. And with the recent acquisition, we are now at about $49.5 trillion under asset management, or what we typically call custody business. If you were to put it in your language, it's fundamentally a fintech company. And that means our clients who probably are having assets and their funds and different instruments recently started to look at investments in the cryptocurrency as well. And you heard that just now from Mr. Gupta. So as a company that is celebrating 238 years, it's also important to realize that we should be in the game for the next 100 years, 200 years to be able to support. And as Mr. Chaudhary said, you will have an internal bureaucracy or challenges, not by design, but by the fact that we are also operating globally. So we would look for startups to come and support us in many ways. And one of the things that we see as an opportunity is, and sometimes you don't even know that you can approach us. And the best way is actually a platform like this, in my opinion. And congratulations to the ICC and, of course, the Kerala startup mission. These kind of platforms actually is helping us to be able to meet with the startups. And if we have to leapfrog in the next 5 years and making sure that India, which is now marked as the third largest startup companies in the world, clocking about 68,000 plus startups, and we need to leapfrog further and not only get to the highest rank, but also making sure our startups work, that connection need to happen. And technically, we will not be able to know what startups are there in the market for us to be able to come through. And you may not even know that you can actually come to us for funding and support. So be it the examples that Mr. Chaudhary gave on Succeed Innovation Fund, or it could be Invest India, what you just heard from my panel member, or a platform like this can certainly help make a difference. Hopefully, some of these discussions will turn into an outcome is what we are looking at. Otherwise, quite frankly, if I were to put it in a layman terms, there was no easy way for us to know who we can tap, especially when we are looking at building our cryptocurrency platforms.
Thanks, Ramesh. For some of the startup representatives here, catch hold of Ramesh before he leaves Kochi. Otherwise, it's very difficult to catch him. Thank you. So, Jyoti, you recently joined one of the biggest banks, French banks, Societe Generale. So, I know that similar kind of issues, even for vendor management or associating with the startups. So, how do you see that Societe Generale, your French bank, is handling these things, particularly since you are heading open innovation? What is it, open innovation? How really it is open for startup companies to interact with you and see that they build a strong bridge with Societe Generale? Please go ahead.
Thank you. Very important question out here, because just by the term open innovation, we are talking about a culture and a complete framework where it's a very inside-out kind of a thing. Just like State Street, we are also a very, very old organization. We are a financial service more than 150 years old, so comes with a lot of legacy. We are like literally equivalent to the SBIs of France. And the intent might be there, but it's a huge boat. We can't be as nimble, can't be as agile with the new techs which is happening. So it's very important for any big such legacy regulated kind of institution and organization to start looking at nimble players who can move fast, who can bring technology. And especially the India offices, which is a 100% subsidiary of Societe Generale, we are the capability centers, which means that it's not just at the financial instruments, we also look at the technology-based enablement and the technical trends, the capabilities out there in the market. It's not very easy to adopt because most of it is very Western Europe kind of regulations when it comes to the instruments. So we have to look at different goals. What are the short-term goals where we are able to adopt with the startups? What are the mid-term goals? When we are saying mid-term, it could be 3 to 5 years kind of association. Is it a longish kind of association? Are we looking at them as our partners? Are we looking at them as our service providers? Are we looking at some co-creations or just complete acquisition? And these can only happen when we are there in platforms and we can initiate some kind of a dialogue. So when it comes to technology, we are quite aggressive when you're saying AI, ML, NFT, metaverse, you name it, and we are talking about it. Why? Because in this particular space, these are very important areas to start looking into. The same way, we might be also looking at payment innovation. In fact, right now, while we are talking, we are going to just initiate an accelerator program for some of the best innovation in the payment sector. So more than happy to talk to all the startups who would like to talk about their solutions in this space. Thank you.
Thank you, Jyoti. Pratik, you were just mentioning while you were introducing yourself, in Hitachi, you are looking for a lot of new emerging solutions. Probably some of those emerging solutions, what you are looking for may be available in the Kochi at the Startup Innovation Mission here. Maybe you should spend a little bit more time in Cochin and see what solutions may be fitting into you. Particularly, Pratik, since you are heading the artificial intelligence division in Hitachi, AI plays a very, very important role in the fintech gamut because all data has to be, you need to have intelligence decisions for faster processing of any data and all that. That's where, AI plays a very important role. How do you see Hitachi and yourself to be helpful in building those small and bigger bridges for startup community in this ecosystem with Hitachi? Go ahead.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chaudhary. And before starting, I think Mr. Kaza and Jyoti talked about their company's age, 200 years old, 100 years old. I think we are the youngest, just 100 years, right? So we are not too old of a company that way. But I think having said that, I think, nowadays emerging technologies, it's difficult to find, what a use case is, right? So I think 10 years back, when someone would think about how to develop a new product or a service, they would say, I know the product, I know the problem, I know the way to develop a solution. And they would go about developing it, right? That was called, in IT's parlance, waterfall method, right? Then came a approach that, I know the problem, but I don't know the solution. I will iterate and do it, and that is what started getting called as an agile. In the current scenario, the thing is, I don't know the problem, I don't know the solution, right? So it's about trying to find out, working with the people, working with the stakeholder, and saying, okay, I know a broad theme around which there is a problem, and I will try to identify the problem, and I will try to identify the solution, right? And it's about fail fast, learn quickly, fail fast, and keep iterating, right? Even in, I think, a lot of unicorns that are developed in India, none of them started with the vision that they currently are, right? Even amongst the biggest e-commerce platform in India started as a bookstore, and now you see what all they do, right? And I guess that's the approach that we want, that, try out things in various forms and shape. And it's especially a bit difficult to work with enterprises like us, right? The big enterprises who have big solutions, big products. So I think it's about engagement, right? And I think one thing that I personally prefer, and the startups should engage in, is having a bit of a sales force that can really help them close their engagements fast, right? Because these enterprises take a long time to deliver or finalize some engagement with the government, with any private, other businesses that they work with, right? So having a team in the startups focused on trying to close their business fast would be a worthwhile investment by these companies. So that's something that I would really, encourage the startups to think about, having a sales team, a team who can develop relationships and try to really close the business.
Thank you, Pratik. Varun, you were just mentioning that from Government of India, you have your own fund, you also help the companies and all that. Coming to the aspect of building these bridges between the government and the startups, or enabling the startups to connect them to the right kind of corporates. So do you also help the startups, not only funding and also helping in connecting these bridges for the startups?
Thank you, Mr. Chaudhary. Before coming to this point, one thing I definitely want to mention, Jyoti mentioned it, Mr. Kaza mentioned it, Pratik mentioned it. The youngest title actually should go to Invest India. We were actually conceptualized and set up in 2015. So we are a 7-year-old government entity which has done some remarkable work. And just to showcase a few numbers, currently our team is handling around 820 plus companies across all Make in India sectors with a cumulative worth of $193 billion.
Excellent.
So that is what we've achieved in the last 7 years, and I think there's a long way to go from here. Coming back to your question, Mr. Chaudhary, I think it's very important. The entity has been set up to ensure that there's certain connection between the government and the private sector. And when I say government and the private sector, this government is quite open to learning about new ways of doing business. They want to understand what are the best practices and how can you replicate it in the country to ensure ease of doing business and innovation in the sector altogether. Especially talking about fintech, the government has already set up the inter-ministerial committee, which is chaired by the Secretary DA and has the top regulators, including RBI, SEBI, IDA, and including some of the ministries, including MSME and other entities from the government as well. The key thought is to understand what is happening around the globe. How can you take on the best practices and start replicating it in India so that it actually benefits the people and startups on the ground? 2019, they had launched a report which talked about, e-KYC, video KYC, and as we see, that's a reality today. So all these things have been thought through, and that's where, inputs from startup, what exactly is the roadblock, what exactly is the challenge that they're facing, that's where Invest India becomes their eyes and ears to the government and take those discussions forward. There are multiple other engagement modes. For example, there's a fintech joint working group which is happening between Singapore and United Kingdom. And there's a lot of deliberation going on. How do you do cross-learning between multiple startups? What are the problem statements which the startups from UK can look for India and Indian startups can tap into international markets? And these dialogues are not just limited to 2 countries. It's being further explored in many more Asian markets as well. Having said that, we do have a Startup India initiative which was launched by the Honorable Prime Minister in 2016 House at Invest India. There's a dedicated team of around 40 young professionals who are working day and night to ensure that any startup related information, query, concern is reaching out to the right audience, whether it's DA for financial services, whether it's DPIIT or for IP or other related matters. Our team is there to ensure and handhold and facilitate these startups to make sure that, the next unicorns, which we've already reached to the 100 marks, goes to the next level altogether as well. And our team will be happy to work with the startups who are present here to understand how we can support them to move on to the next level. Thank you.
Varun, you are doing a great job in promoting the startup companies, not only for funding and also enabling them to get connected. Particularly, Varun, today India is talking about several $1 trillion economy, and a lot of money is going to be spent by Government of India and various state governments. And particularly the Government of India, the kind of projects that I see in the newspapers, and that throws a lot of opportunities for the Indian startups. Because government is the biggest purchaser, right? If we're able to come out with a policy, how Government of India can help the startups across the nation. Because since I worked in the government, ultimately it comes down to tendering process, L1, and L1 will get the. If we go that route, none of these startup companies will get any business either from the central government or from the state governments. In fact, when I was with the state government, government of Andhra Pradesh, when I was the special chief secretary to Honorable then Chief Minister Chandrababu Naidu, he asked me to develop the Fintech Valley Vizag. It is so tough for me to get the startup companies come to Vizag because manpower was not there, money was not there, and most importantly, business. I told Honorable Chief Minister, sir, unless we have got a lot of e-governance projects, real-time governance and all these things, we are spending billions of dollars. Why don't we reserve some portion of that government implementation for the startups? He readily agreed and reserved about 15% of any government e-governance projects and all that. In addition to that, what was happening is when they applied, again, the reservation policy was there, but still they were following the tendering process. Again, the same problems were coming. Then we had to change the tendering process to hackathon way. See, what happens is in the tendering, L1, whether he has got the competency or capability, he will get the project. So we suggested no, for this 15%, whatever we are giving the business to the startups, it has to go through the hackathon process. That enabled many startups were able to win that hackathon, and they were able to get the projects through that 15%. So similar to that, Varun, I want to extend my this thing, because it's a great time for India. Startup companies are rising. Today, Open has become a first $1 billion fintech company from Kerala. So many more such unicorns are going to come. But government has to play. The most important role is really that strong bridge between the startup and the government business. How are you able to make it happen?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chaudhary. And as you rightly mentioned, when we look at some of the states which are pioneer, Andhra is one which has done some remarkable work on ground. Having said that, the government has taken in a lot of good initiatives which is moving in the right direction. For example, DPIIT, which is the Department for Promotion of Industries and Trade, has set up this startup recognition mechanism where certain recognized startups get preferential treatment for certain projects in the government as well. I do understand, RFP and different mechanism where L1, quality, price is a big concern, but they've started figuring out how innovative solutions can also become those part of RFPs as well. And that's where, Startup India is working very closely with different ministries in conceptualizing certain startup seed funds, incubators, and network within those ministries, so that those PSUs, for example, if there are multiple PSUs under the ministries, they can have a sandbox. They can have some special projects where they can open up, a limited scale of a particular project for those companies to experiment. And once in government, as you know that precedence works very well. So if we see some good examples where some startups are able to showcase a great innovation in those particular industries, the government is open to exploring more avenues. And having said that, there's an open stack within the government which is currently doing ground, where government is opening up APIs for multiple of these huge data-centric ministries as well, where they want startups to come back and showcase some kind of innovative solution to the problems which are facing. It's a process which has been initiated, but again, we will require inputs, feedback from ground. What are the challenges? What are the problems that you're facing, so that we can take it collectively as an industry voice, as a startup union voice, and take it to the government that these are the enablers which are required if we want to move on to the next level. Thank you.
Thank you, Varun. My next question is to both the banks, Ramesh as well as Jyoti. See, again, I bring back my involvement with AP government when I was promoting the Fintech Valley, Vizag. That time, many startups came to Vizag, but they said, very difficult, sir, for us to go to any bank to get any use cases from the bank. Then we appointed KPMG to build the use case repository. The KPMG went to various public sector banks and private sector banks and also insurance company. They collected all the pain points. We were able to create world's largest use case repository in the fintech space, both in the banking, insurance, and all the sectors. So since both of you are bankers, do you also, prepare such use case repository, and you run hackathons inviting the startup companies from various parts of the country?
Yes, thanks. I'll go first. Yes, there are multiple ways that we attract the startups. So the instruments, one of the very signature flagship instrument that we have is Catalyst. It was initiated with NASSCOM in 2016 by Society General's GSC. We do run across Europe as well, the other programs. So like I mentioned in my previous talk that there are different goals. So at times we just want to go check all the possible technologies and solutions which is there. The whole experimenting fast experimenting, fail fast, succeed fast, just figure out whether there is a scope or not. So there would be instruments like hackathons and quick talks, quick demos, meets, speed dating kind of meets where we do have short catch-ups with the available solutions. Then we have these repository of use cases from different business lines. We find out which are the most key useful ones. Then we run the accelerator program based on that. We run it sometimes just purely based on the number of use cases as to how relevant it is, just as an organization ourselves, or we do involve different bodies, industry bodies. We work along with them, or we participate in their own programs. And then, of course, there are through our partners that we do scouting for very, very specific solutions when we are talking about far more long-term relationships. So depending on the kind of association that we are seeking, the kind of solution that we are seeking, that is where we start looking at particular instruments. And yes, it is not just about working in silo. We do collaborate with other global banks as well. We work with different industry bodies. We try and initiate with the other IT companies as well. So yes, we're trying to touch base upon every single ecosystem player, and don't think we are unique in it, because that's the game these days. You have to collaborate or perish.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Ramesh?
Let me probably get some statistics to this group, see if I can excite you. When I returned back to the country in 2010, I was getting used to knowing more about NASSCOM. That was my first connect to know, because I was out of the country for a long time. You don't get to really know more details. If my statistics are right, we were talking about $100 billion of IT and IT-enabled services kind of revenue we were making as a country, and we were inviting many companies from outside India to come and set up here. And any company that comes and set up here, like what Ms. Jyoti's company is or my company is, or for that matter even Hitachi, they are typically called global in-house centers, previously called captives. I still remember the number was actually 3-digit. We were talking about 700, 800 companies. Go back to NASSCOM site. For all the startups, you should be very excited to know that the companies that have come have actually doubled already in just 10 years. So it took probably 25 years for that to become 800. Now we are talking about doubling it up. Now, all of us know this very well. Close to about 40% of this industry is actually banking, financial services, and insurance, which is typically what this FinTech forum is about. Look at the opportunities. And if I were not to be criticizing anything related to the process we need to follow related to the bidding and other things, you don't need that to be able to partner with us. It's a lot more easier. And I'll tell you how probably it can help you to connect the dots around. Just like the way what Ms. Jyoti said, that they have a catalyst program, it's nothing but a forum where we will bring people from the different functions and then ideate on all the challenges we are going through to support our customers. It's nothing new, everybody does it. You ideate, you come out with ideas around. And then we are actually taking our employees' help to connect back to the startups, because this younger generation is a lot more well connected to the startup communities, more than people like me, who might not be very well connected to the communities we talk about. So to bring back that to the home and to where I currently work, Hyderabad, I'm also currently serving as a strategic advisor to the IT minister on a pro bono basis, and I take the lead for the banking industry only. And we have identified this as one of the gaps. If I were to have any of my competitors and colleagues from this industry to be able to work with startups, how do we make it happen? And I'm sure Ms. Chaudhary knows this, because I keep updating him and also take quite a bit of mentoring from him. And what we realized is all we need is every BFSI industry in Telangana state will be present once a week, if not once a month, and we can have these startups come and actually pitch for us. And we will ensure that what we do, we share it in the right platform so that we are not trying to just keep this for ourselves. Maybe that's a call to action for the KSM organization, the Kerala Startup Mission, to see if we can exchange the best practices across the states. That way we can accelerate this program further.
Thank you, Ramesh. Pratik, in the technology space, since you are heading AI and other emerging technology divisions in Hitachi, how do you see the impact of NFTs and metaverse going forward for the fintech segment? What are the opportunities, what are the threats, what they're supposed to look for?
It's a very loaded and a heavy question, and I don't know if I will be able to answer that to, I think, people's excitement. But I guess these emerging technologies are great, right? So every second day we have a new technology coming up. I think we probably heard about this CoinDX a few minutes earlier. Metaverse is another thing that, people are excited to talk about. But what value it creates, I think people are discovering, right? And I think that's where the thing is. I think the mindset of a use case versus mindset of a technology, I think that's where the difference has to come in. And I think we have to focus upon how can we make any technology be usable for a business, for a customer, and things like that, as against what the technology by itself will do. So I think even within our company, we are trying to get a bit more about use case centric, what's the outcome that we can drive. And I think if the same thinking can go in either the startups or everywhere, right? That will really help identifying the right use case and right use of technology. So we are experimenting as with anyone else.
Thank you, Pratik. How much more time we have? Do you have time for the question answers to take? Only one question? So there's a time only for one question from the audience. If anybody wants to ask any question to one of us, please, first come, first serve. If there are no questions, they will be very happy. If there are no questions, I have a suggestion to the Kerala government, who are representing here. See, in every city, we have started Fintech forums. Bangalore Fintech Forum, Hyderabad Fintech Forum, Chennai Fintech Forum, Mumbai Fintech Forum. Since you have got a Fintech ecosystem is being built here in Kochi, and you already have a unicorn in Fintech, my strong suggestion is create such forum, and we'll help you. Not only we have to think global, just not Kochi enough. I mean, once you are part of a Fintech forum, you get other people also to join the Kochi Fintech Forum, so that you'll have some events, and networking is very, very important. Through these Fintech forums, we can conduct some networking events and all that. It's all about bridge. You have to correct, right bridge with the right kind of partners, right kind of whatever the corporates and all that. Only that will make you succeed. Not raising money, not having a space in incubator and accelerator, that's not going to solve your dream. If you want to really succeed in your dream, it's all about networking, it's all about connecting to the people and getting the business. For that, I strongly recommend to create Kochi Fintech Forum, and we'll help you to make it happen. With this, I thank the organizers for giving us this opportunity. Thank you.